Rome over here, so it's a beautiful day to be in the car. Unfortunately, just a little longer.
If you want to give a 2-minute opening, and then the press can immediately start asking their questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you again. My name is John Hitchens, and I'm running for Public Service Commission. Now, many of you may not be familiar with what that role entails. They are the ones who regulate your telecommunications, electric, and natural gas. Now, one thing I'm going to start with, next year, starting next year, your rates are going to increase in your electric bills 11 to 14%. This comes from Tim Eccles, who is on the current Public Service Commission. I say that because back in 2008, 2009, Georgia Power and the Public Service Commission told us that if we, Georgia Power ratepayers, paid for Plant Vogtle ahead of time through a tax, which I like to call a nuclear tax, then we would avoid a rate shock of around 12%. So, as many of you may know, Plant Vogtle is currently billions of dollars delayed and way over budget and way over time for being completed. Meanwhile, ratepayers have been paying for that up front, and it looks like we will get the quote-unquote rate shock as well. So, I am running because I do not plan to advocate for the utilities. I plan to advocate for Georgians. I will represent your best interests and not that of the utilities who I should be regulating, who the Public Service Commission should be regulating. So it is time for a change. It is time to put the public service back in the Public Service Commission, and I intend to do that. Thank you.
John, my first question had to deal with exactly that, Plant Vogtle, and I'm going to make the assumption you feel like the PSC made the wrong decision in the way they handled that, particularly this latest vote. What, if anything, can be done with that project at this point to avoid that 11 to 14% increase, or is that a done deal and nothing to be done?
Again, as it has been stated, and this is from Tim Eccles, it is a done deal. So the rate, there will be a rate review next year, which is typical. This is how they go through the process of rate reviews, and that there will be the increase next year, and nothing can be done to prevent that. So we are currently looking at a $25 billion project that is about 5 years overdue, and on top of all of that, we don't even know if they'll hit those marks, and we'll still get that quote-unquote rate shock.
The utility industry's always been highly regulated. In your campaign website, you mentioned to encourage competition. How does the Public Service Commissioner encourage competition in the provision of utilities?
Well, and that's a good question. I mean, I think my biggest thing towards that competition is letting the market play out instead of favoring and picking the winners. Now, as the current state law is, that would take some changing, but that would be something I would advocate for. Because right now we're putting the thumb on the scale, and we're not letting the free market decide what is in the best interests of the ratepayers. We're simply letting the PSC, who have shown they're heavily influenced by those who they're supposed to be regulating.
John, along those lines, you've been quoted as saying that the current commission has established, I think you used the phrase, corporate welfare, and what they are doing and how they voted. What specifically do you mean by that, and how can someone in the District 5 undo that?
Well, so towards the corporate welfare is they're rewarding failure. Plant Vogtle is a failure all across the board. We can argue about whether it should have been done in the first place. Nuclear has, in the United States, has never been on time and never been on budget. So history showed, even back in 2009, this was a risky proposition. As it stands, we have since seen that Georgia Power essentially was never held responsible for the poor decisions, the time frame, any of that nature. They were continuing to make their profits regardless of whether they fell behind. So there was no incentive for them to be sure to maintain that schedule. That would be the first thing I would do is, if we are in favor of a project, first of all, I would never vote to put it on the back of the ratepayer and not on the shareholder of the company itself. But if we're building a project, we're going to hold them accountable the whole way through. Make sure that they're hitting the marks that they claim that they can hit. That's why I don't even know that by 2021 and 2022, I don't know that this plant Vogel will still be finished. That's the new date that Georgia Power set. But what's the guarantee? What's the history showing us? We'll see.
What are some specific policies you would advocate for that are consumer friendly?
First and foremost, policies that I would advocate for is removing schools and places of worship from this nuclear tax. That's something that I don't know that many people are aware. You're being taxed multiple times by this policy, not just at your residence. The school's being taxed. Your house of worship is being taxed. That's money that needs to be spent towards those projects. Schools are having enough problems as it is. They don't need to be shelling out $10,000 extra out of their budget to prop up, a boondoggle that for a for-profit company. Same thing with house of worship. I'm very involved in my church. But we work hard to make sure that our mission work goes out into the community. But it's about $10,000 a year that we're paying in a nuclear tax, and that's money that could be feeding the hungry or helping with habitat builds or something of that nature.
And I don't want to make any assumptions or put words in your mouth, but I think I know the answer to this before I ask. But how would you rate the job done by former Commissioner Stan Wise during his tenure on the PSC? And secondly, how, if at all, will you approach your responsibilities differently than he did?
I would say his legacy will be defined by Plant Vogel, which he was strongly in favor of. He continues to say that, he doesn't see any fault behind this and that it is what it is. Things happen and things are out of our control. And I would strongly disagree with that. We, as a conservative, I look at this as a fiscal responsibility to make sure you're representing the ratepayers. And I feel, in the end, he and the other commissioners failed the ratepayers on that. And that very well could be his defining legacy of 23 years, is, having failed in a fiscal manner to those that he was supposed to be representing. But Georgia Power is still making their profits, so they're not hurting, but, for someone who's raising kids or, has to find that extra money to put towards their electric bill, I don't look too kindly on that. So my goal would be to represent those people and make sure that the individuals are the ones who are looked after and not the individuals.
What criteria will you use in casting those as a public service commissioner if you're elected?
So one thing I'm not sure many people are aware of with the Public Service Commission, they have a very highly trained, highly skilled staff that make recommendations to them based on the economics, based on a lot of the data that they compile. They came across and said that that Plant Vogel now was not economical, and that just like South Carolina did, Georgia should just cut our losses and be done with it. That was a consensus of the staff, and all 5 commissioners looked at that and voted the other way. For me, someone who would have some learning curve on the job, I would definitely look at that staff and I would take what they have to say with high regard. I think they've earned that.
So my final question for you this evening has to do with let's just say the relationship between the commissioners and the utilities. How do you ensure that there is a proper separation between PSC commissioner and a lobbyist or someone representing a utility?
I mean, I think personal emails, possibly text, we don't know because text messages were deleted. I think that's the first step, is to maintain that professional relationship and not a personal relationship. Look, I know it sounds like I'm very anti-Georgia Power, or very anti-utilities, and that's not the case. Georgia's in a good place, and I want to make sure that we are still a good place to bring businesses in with good utilities, but I want to make sure that they are also held responsible for the job that they're supposed to be doing. And that's a professional relationship. That's not a personal relationship. That's not, a golfing buddy relationship. That's, you have your time at the office, and I don't believe that personal emails need to be sent, especially when a very important vote is coming down the pipe. I think that's just, to me, that's a pretty easy, hey, I can talk to you about it tomorrow on the record when we're in the office. That's how I would look at it.
And this will be my final question. Does the state have any role to play in encouraging the expansion of high-speed internet into rural areas?
I believe so, and this is one of the critical things that I believe why a change needs to be made on the Public Service Commission. There are millions of Georgians who are not under Georgia Power's service territory. But my worry is that a precedent has been set, and that when other companies come in this case high-speed internet companies, say, well, we'll get that to the places, but it's going to cost us a lot to get that infrastructure there. If they'll pay for it up front, then we'll be okay with it. That's the precedent that's been set. And what's to say that the next job that maybe someone who isn't Georgia Power ratepayer, but does need that high-speed internet, now they're going to be footing the bill for that company, and meanwhile they'll be making a profit. So that's what worries me. We could look at this and say it's just in a time capsule, it's just this one issue, but I feel like the precedent has been set for others to come and say, hey, well, you did it for Georgia Power, so why won't you do it for us? So I definitely believe getting that high speed to rural areas is critical, but I also believe that getting that infrastructure is on the companies that would be getting rewarded in the end, not on the ratepayers.
I failed to mention, I guess because I was worried about you not making it. Both candidates were invited. Tricia Pridemore declined our invitation. Okay, questions from the audience, you still get a 2-minute answer. Okay? What qualifies you to run for this position?
I will be honest, I am the political outsider, and I believe that actually is what qualifies me. I've been working in conservation for the past 10 years. I've been very proud of the fact that I've often been the only conservative voice in the room, and I think that's critical in allowing folks, when you're working in conservation, to hear another side of the topic, so that we can come to a conclusion on how to protect this wonderful planet and state of ours. And I think that qualifies me to be able to go into the room at what could possibly be 4 other commissioners who feel very differently than I do, and not feel like I'm being bullied or feel like I'm going to back down from what I believe. I'm used to being kind of the lone guy and the lone wolf in the room. And I'm also, as I said, because I'm that outside voice, I don't have ties to the utilities, I don't have ties to the electric companies, I don't have any commitments to them. I'm committed to the people of Georgia, and that's who would elect me, and that's who I'd be representing.
Who is going to pay for the nuclear power overrun?
Georgians. I mean, that's the issue here currently, and I'll backtrack on that, not just Georgians, because this is being propped up through federal loans as well. So people throughout the country are the ones who are paying for the plant Vogel overrun. Georgia Power shareholders are benefiting, even when the delays were occurring and it was not even being constructed, they were still making profits. But because of the decisions that have been made, there's really nothing to undo that. We can't really put that toothpaste back in the bottle, and we'll be paying for those decisions for years to come.
State your past 10 years business experience.
Past 10 years business experience. So I have been, as I said, been working in conservation for the past 10 years, working in program development, education, fundraising, as well as advocacy. So my experience in that side of it is that I've been advocating for solar over the past year, and so I've seen how that system works, and I've seen how solar is just one of the solutions to the many different issues that we're facing when it comes to electricity, kind of to decentralize our electrical system, and that of course is one thing that I think Georgia Power is the most afraid of, and the other utilities. But my experience is that I will be coming in from the other side of it, knowing what the advocates, not just the lobbyists, but what the advocates feel like as well, and being able to bring that state of mind into the decision-making process.
There are parts of Cherokee County without internet. How do we fix that?
Again, this is an issue, this is part of the issue where I would be working with the utilities. I'm not against utilities, that they do have a role to play. And the decision-making process is not an easy one to figure out what is most economical for Georgians. I mean, of course, we can get high-speed internet to places in Cherokee County and other rural areas, but then when it comes time to pay the bill, it's going to be steep. So part of that process is just figuring out what is the best case scenario for the ratepayers, but also for the utilities who would be providing that infrastructure. And it's kind of a, you kind of weighing that game out. Because if you make it purely in the best interest of the ratepayers, then the utilities aren't going to be interested. If you make it purely in the best interest of the utilities, then I feel like you're failing the people who voted you in office. So it's finding that middle ground, but it's certainly not completely capitulating to the utility.
Do you have an opinion on net neutrality, and does the PSC have a leadership role on this issue?
So my opinion on net neutrality is kind of an interesting one. On the outside, as it's just stated, I would prefer to remove as many barriers, as many obstacles, regulations, which is kind of ironic with the position that I'm running for, which is purely based on regulating utilities. My wife actually works for Google, and Google is very clear that they are for net neutrality. But currently, as it stands, the FCC has certainly made their ruling on this. There was a bill going through Georgia this past legislature trying to reinstate net neutrality within the state. Last, I believe, as I understand it, that did not even come up for a vote. So until the state legislature were to approach it, it wouldn't be an issue for the Public Service Commission. And I don't anticipate that passing in a conservative state anytime soon.
Last question. What qualifies, no, that's not it. What do you want to accomplish during your term if elected?
I think the biggest thing that I would like to accomplish is to open up the marketplace, particularly to solar, which I think if you were to take away all the subsidies that other energy sources get, solar is the most economical at this time. It would also decentralize, as I mentioned earlier, the current electric system. I think if I had one thing to aim for, it would be to release schools and houses of worship from that current nuclear tax. If I had two things to aim for, it would be to get the buyback for solar. So if you had solar on your roof, Georgia Power and the other utilities would have to purchase it at a fair market rate. I think the fact that they are purchasing it back, unused power that you are realizing off of your own home, and they're purchasing back at 2.3 cents, that would be my second item that I would most likely accomplish, is that they have to purchase it back at fair market value.
Thank you, John. Can you feel good with your closing?
Yes, well, again, so thank you. I appreciate Cherokee County having me out today. I just want to make it clear one more time that this job, while regulation is a big part of it, my goal is not to be an anti-utility. We all are very fortunate with many of the utilities that we have at our disposal, but it's simply to represent the people of Georgia and utilities' interests. That is my purpose in running for this. We currently have a public service commissioner who was handpicked by an outgoing governor, and in the end, I decided that the people of Georgia just should have a choice and which conservative they want representing them in November, as opposed to simply the person that our governor picked. So I'm here so that you can voice your choice in May, and I hope you'll consider me for that position, and I hope to be battling into November so that I can represent each and every one of you on the Georgia Public Service Commission.